Hi, this is Jamie with Is This Thing On podcast. I am so happy that you have decided to join me on my podcast, especially on the very first episode. It looks kind of like I'm in a public access studio, but I'm actually in my place in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am just nervous and excited about this new podcast. I've done a previous podcast called Last Saturday Night, and it was more based on history. And I also didn't upload it to YouTube. So this will be the first time I'm actually putting my face out there. I'm a new podcaster to this, I'm a new YouTuber to this. So please bear with me. I know um, people have, really slick productions and I'm doing this myself, but I hope you enjoy it. The reason for the season is I want to discuss my healing journey after a 20-year relationship ended and what that really looked like for me. A few quick notes about myself. I'm 48. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I have two dogs named Bruce and Diana. And if you get that reference, you are part of my tribe. I I have a full life. I have friends. I work a full-time job, go on vacations, all the things. Main point is this is a relationship healing podcast. This is not a podcast on how to get a man. I am not saying I don't want a relationship, but that is not my focus for this podcast, and you'll probably understand why more. A little bit about my podcast. I mean, not my podcast, my relationship. I'll give you a quick little overview. It was just about 20 years. We met at church through a friend. A few years into the relationship, he proposed, then took it back. I'll tell you why later. Then he proposed to me again once I had already decided to leave the relationship. March 7th, 2023 is when I decided emotionally that I was done with the relationship. August of 2023 is when I told him we should try to be friends. September of 2023, he had a significant family event happen that I was there for him for. November 2023, he proposed to me again. December 2023, January 2nd of 2024, I ended the relationship. We have not talked vocally since then. We exchanged a couple of text messages in January 2023 to close out our relationship. So it's now been a year since I have spoken to him or seen him. Um, and so it was for me, about 2 years of getting out of that and getting to where I am now. And I want to do this podcast because when I broke up with him, uh, the algorithms immediately switched to, how to get over your breakup. Were you with the narcissist? Narcissistic tactics, toxic people, how to keep yourself out of situationships. But I just didn't see a lot of podcasts about one of the main feelings I had, which was shame and embarrassment. Um, and and forgiveness, not to him, but to myself. And I feel like maybe it's time I talk about this because maybe there are other people who feel this. So, and don't know if they're going to get to the other side. So I hope to keep us laughing. There might be some tears, but that is the purpose of my podcast. Okay, we're going to get into the moment where I decided to check out of my relationship emotionally. We all know women leave emotionally a long time before they actually leave physically. So I'm just going to give you the highlights for this. I also want to put as an asterisk to my podcast, this is not a podcast about bashing my ex. I will not provide any um, identifying markers about him, I suppose. he will be referred to as the ex because this podcast is about me and not him. I was an active participant in that relationship, and allowed things to I allow things. So because of me. So we will talk about me. You can't heal from it unless you own it. So I mentioned before that March 7th was the day that it ended for me emotionally. I had been visiting him prior. He had moved out of state. So I had made plans to have brunch with one of my friends that lives there. And on my, I'm getting ready to leave. And he's like, well, I'm going to go meet a friend, for something. And I'm like, oh, you didn't mention that. And the reason I said that was because I had been talking about meeting up with my friend, for days before it happened. And, and I said it casually. It wasn't accusatory. Like I literally was playing with the dog when I said it. And he went off on me. He said, he mentioned it to me. There's something wrong with, you know, my memory. I need to get my memory checked. I'm insecure, just all of these things. And I went back at him. I said, no, you didn't mention any of this. And, we got into a tiff and I just left. So I went to brunch and I vented this off to my friend. And I only mentioned that because that's going to matter at a later date. So I get back from brunch and I send him a text basically apologizing, saying, okay, well, maybe I misheard. Maybe I don't remember, whatever. I'm sorry. You know, let's not do that again. So he comes back from wherever he had been and he, is like, okay, and everything's fine. I stay for a few more days and then I come back home to Atlanta. And, we talked like we normally do every day until this session that he was coming to with my therapist. So he gets on the call and my therapist is, how is everything? And he immediately brings up what happens and saying that he felt that I was being insecure, that I have an issue with him having friends, just all of these things that he didn't mention after we spoke about this because I was coming on the call to say that we talked about it and worked through it and I get it. And he came on the call to say all of these things. So I exploded. I completely went off. I started crying and screaming and just being upset. And it was so bad that my therapist texted me and told me on the side, because we're on the Zoom, she texted me on the side and told me to calm down and that she would talk to me after the session. So from that moment on, when after I got the text, I just bit my tongue because she kept trying to get him to explain why he didn't talk about all of these things before, before the session. So we get off the call and she calls me and she just says that was manipulation and you need to figure out what you're going to do. And I burst into tears. I absolutely burst into tears because I thought that she was going to call me to tell me that I have a real anger problem, that, he's right, you know, all of these things. And it felt validating that someone saw it because I had been in therapy, you guys, for like a year up to this point. So parts of me were healing and I was getting more confidence back into myself. And I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew he didn't mention any of that to me. I knew that. And when we were actually on the call, I saw the smirk. I saw the joy he was taking in me being crazy and someone else seeing it. And that's going to be important because later we did talk about this, him and I. And as a quick, he thinks I was embarrassed. And I had to keep stressing to him, no, that's when I absolutely hurt. That's when you fully broke my heart because I knew in that moment that he didn't even like me. He didn't like I was his plaything and he was sent here to destroy me. So I shut off emotionally from him. I The hope that had been fueling me for years in that relationship evaporated. Um the heart and the brain finally became one. And I was done. Now, brain wise, I was resolute in it. Heart was there, but she needed a little bit more time. And that's what we're going to talk about too. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about why, you have to move on, and why I stated, in my last segment that it's not about him, it's about you. And the I will be honest and say the reasons I was in that relationship for so long and being fueled by hope was because I didn't want to be alone, and it wasn't all bad, and it wasn't all soul crushing. We had a lot of good moments, and there are a lot of things we had in our relationship and how we got along that I still do want in, my next relationship. But the main thing is that I need to be confident in myself before I'm in another relationship. And I think that's what people need to work on more than the signs that you're in a situationship. We all have this fear of being alone. And I will say though that one of my one of my other motivations with therapy and once I decided to move on was, everyone talks about, being the rich auntie and whatnot. And, I'm not the rich auntie, but I do like to take care of my nieces, but I also didn't want to be the auntie that was just with an uncle for years. I just didn't want that. And I didn't want to be a woman in a relationship just to have a piece of a man. Like I didn't want that for myself. And it was always an underlying current under the fuel of hope that I was holding on to. It never set comfortably with me, but I would see glimpses of what we could be in a relationship, and I just would hold on to that hope. And it would always I would feel that if he could just be that way again, it would be great. And it just wasn't. So therapy, I started therapy, to help with other relationships. And that's another big point I want to make about this. Yes, this is about my relationship with my ex and how I've healed and moved on from that. But it's also me discussing all of my relationships, even with friends, because you show up in the same way in all of them, really. It just may be varying degrees of cutoff. Like it might be easier for you to let, maybe a friendship go or something than someone that you're in love with, but you still show up as that person. So, really, once you start healing yourself, like all your relationships are going to change. And that's, something I've had to deal with these last couple of years, relationships and how I am in them. Because, with friends, I was the queen of ghosting. I would just deuces out. But we'll discuss it later, but I have learned that it's better just to reposition people. It doesn't mean you have to cut them out. And, you know, like save your energy for the people who give you the same kind of energy. But you have to move on for you. That has to be your reason why. And you have to deal with the pain, you have to deal with the shame, you have to deal with the embarrassment. But ultimately it has to be about you, and it's tough. It is a tough road to walk. So I'm not saying it's easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it can be done, y'all. I promise you it can. And to piggyback off of myself, in friend relationships, I have realized that I shortchange myself a lot. And, you know, I make myself feel away. I make people treat me away because of how I feel about myself. And, I run with, you know, some great women. They're all just doing magnificent things in their lives. But I tended to put people on pedestals that they didn't ask for. And they didn't ask for, and that they don't really deserve, because my worth was in the garbage. And once you start healing, though, it's like you can just, it's like I say to my therapist that she has spoiled it for me, but at the same time, I'm happy. It's like I can see the matrix now. I can see what drives people. I can see people's insecurities. I can see it. And I think it's made me, in some ways, more understanding to people, but while also keeping a wall and a boundary up when I see those things in other people, because if they are not actively working on that, that can at some point harm me. So, there's grace, and then there's just being kicked on. And I'm just not going to be kicked on anymore. But I, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, and I really had to be honest with myself at the end of that relationship. And which is why, it hit me in March that I needed to let go of him. But even in August, when I voiced that to him, I still gave him the option of being my friend, because I hadn't yet learned that, you know, he actually didn't deserve that from me. He had really given me no reason to actually believe that he was going to be a good friend to me. But it was like, I still felt I needed that security blanket, or I, not that I needed a security blanket. I think I felt that I was still giving him grace because his background was so much more worse than mine. It doesn't matter, y'all. It doesn't matter. So, we'll talk about those things, but uh, romantic and friend relationships aren't that different. Romantic friend, familiar relationships are not that different. You show up as yourself in varying degrees in all of them. And the thing that combines everything is you. So you can't heal one relationship without it affecting those other ones. So that's the big thing, which is why I always say, and why I always wanted to see people talk about that, because it all goes hand in hand. Romantic, familial, friendships, they all go hand in hand. And if you are doing the work, you will see differences in all of those relationships. You just will. All right, guys, we've come to the end of my very first episode of Is That Thing On? I hope you know that I'm really trying to build a community for women and men who want to heal and do the messy, messy work to overcome a life changing relationship that you've had. And, understand that all the feelings of shame, helplessness, embarrassment, being unable to forgive yourself are all normal parts of the process. And I'm a testament to the fact that you can do all of that messy work and get to the other side and still have issues. No. Not saying I have issues, but I'm just saying that I'm in a much better place than I have been probably in my life emotionally. But it took a lot of work to get here. And as you can see, just a little bit of it was about 2 years of just real work. And I'm still doing the work. So much so that even me doing this podcast is something new for me. I haven't even shared it with actual people in my life because I just feel exposed and I'm still working through my own embarrassment and guilt and shame about that relationship. But I think this will help, and so does my therapist. But so this is why I'm doing this, is to help you and to help me, because I just know when I was looking for things to help me outside of therapy, there just wasn't a lot discussing, like people actually talking about this part of it. So they just talk about, break up, and then this is what you should do to not be in something like that again. But there's a whole middle space that needs to happen for you to even have the confidence and the strength to do that part. So this I'm just hoping to fill the gap. I will have guests and therapists and people more qualified to help you along the way. I will provide book suggestions. My number one book of all is The Mountain Is You. Please read that at your own discretion because it will bring you to your knees. So this is a space to be vulnerable and honest, and it's something that it's my word of the year, vulnerability, and turning my pain into purpose, all of the buzzwords. But I just really want this to be a safe space for you to feel supported, for you to share your thoughts and comments and questions. I can answer some of them on the podcast, or people can answer. Please share the podcast. Please, please, please subscribe. Maybe I'll share it with my friends sooner or later. I'm not sure, but we'll work on that together. My therapist sent me a quote from a woman whose family was murdered, and she was able to forgive the people, and now she shares her experience with people, and she says once you put it out into the world, it doesn't belong to you anymore. So I'm giving you this little gift of vulnerability from me this week, and we will be back next week to discuss more steps and tools that you can use on your journey, or to just hear more about my messiness. Whatever you're here for, I'm here for you. So the name of the podcast comes from a Pink song that is about a long-term relationship that has hit a moment in time, and I always thought it was such a cool name for a podcast because it's like, is that thing on? Is anybody even really listening? So I'm listening. So, and hopefully the community that we build here will be listening too. So again, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.